everybody, to another episode of the Living Better podcast. I'm your host, Matt. This is my lovely wife, Jodi.
Hello.
And today we are with Elizabeth Wood.
And Dee Hartman.
And Elizabeth is a sex educator and a sex researcher. And Dee is a physical therapist and a sex researcher as well. And they joined forces on this interesting journey that they are into helping women. And I'm going to let them explain more the different things that they do. So let's talk about you first, Elizabeth. Would you introduce yourself a little better and explain to us what you do?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us on. We're really excited to be here. And it's nice to meet you both. I started my journey in sex and sexuality by getting a formal education as I got my master's degree in clinical social work, and I became a licensed sex therapist. When I discovered that model, what's termed the medical model, wasn't serving me and wasn't serving my clients, I let that license go after 11 years in good standing. And I did more non-traditional schooling in learning all about other ways to treat sexual issues, sexual problems, not necessarily sexual diagnoses, which is what the medical model does. Mm-hmm. So I did, however, meet Dee, my business partner and dear friend. I met her when I was a sex therapist. But since then, walking away from my license, I have 3, 4, maybe even 5 additional certifications, not licenses, but certifications in alternative methods of looking at sex and sexuality. So that it's been a long time since I did any form of sex therapy, but pretty much anything that we do, whenever we engage in contact or listening to someone, can't that be thought of as therapeutic? I don't administer therapy, but engaging in discussion and conversation, that's therapeutic to people, just listening.
Oh,
so
for sure.
Now I'm a sex educator and a sex researcher.
Amazing. And what about you, Dee?
I am a physical therapist and decided after the birth of my kids to become a specialist in women's health. In doing that, it was a very interesting journey that very quickly took me into the realm of chronic vulvar pain, which is where I spent the majority of my 26 years plus in practice. It really became more of a passion than a job. Although I treated women with pre and postpartum problems, I treated bowel and bladder disorders. I actually treated men and women with abdominal and pelvic pain and dysfunction. But the biggest part of my practice were with women with chronic vulvar pain and the sexual dysfunction that it brought with it. I, as a physical therapist, most PTs, physios' goals really is to give patients what they need to help themselves. So that's how I had been building my practice all along. I too, like Elizabeth, got very frustrated with the medical model that made everything a dysfunction. You know, you have an arousal dysfunction, you have an arousal disorder, you have a desire disorder. We need to find some drug to fix that.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a physical therapist, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. That certainly wasn't my tool. So Elizabeth and I, after we met in the early 2000s, stayed in touch, and we oftentimes would share patients. You know, I'm doing this, and what do you think about this? And she would call me, well, I'm doing this, and what do you think about this? And we went back and forth. So we know that the models that we both use work well together because we both kind of use them interdispersed in what we do. In my world, the literature of, in particular, women with chronic vulvar pain suggests that we can get rid of the pain. I mean, that's truly the easy part for us. But what we can't do is get women with vulvar pain, after it's gone, when they're pain-free, back to the same level of sexual function as women who have never had vulvar pain before.
Wow.
And it's although I worked on it throughout my practice, it's become again our focus to say, look, we in the medical world, under the traditional Western medicine, can get rid of that pain, but then we're missing the boat because we get rid of that vulvar pain and we just tell women, oh, going back and do what you were doing.
Mhm.
And lots of times they have no clue what to do,
Oh.
right? Either
Mhm.
they've always had pain with sex, or they, they depended on somebody else for their pleasure, or they have fear, or they
Yeah.
name, I mean, the list is as long as your arm.
Mhm.
So our goal really is to reintroduce pleasure back to them and allow that pain to resolve as the pleasure grows.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So it's really an exciting journey, and we're just, crazy about what we're doing and very happy to be here, by the way.
Yes,
Thank
of
you.
course. Well, that's amazing. And thank you for the work that you do. When we talk about pain, could you maybe go a little bit in depth of why that is? Why us as women, we can experience pain during sexual intercourse?
Well, we shouldn't. Sex is never supposed to be painful.
Okay.
It wasn't uncommon for me to have patients in my practice come in and say, well, it hurt from the very first time. I just thought it always hurt.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Or, they go to their physicians and they say, I used to be able to have sex and it was just fine. And now all of a sudden it hurts, and it hurts so much that I can't have sex. And a physician will look at them and do a physical exam and say, well, there's really nothing wrong with you. Maybe
Hmm.
before you have sex, have a glass of wine, or,
Yeah.
Take
really
a
get
bath.
relaxed, or take a bath, or perhaps I can give you some lidocaine. If you know what lidocaine is, some numbing cream, and we can put some numbing cream down there. And if you use that a little bit before you try to have penetration, then you won't have any pain. Well, okay.
Yeah.
It
Seriously.
doesn't really get us to where we're supposed to be, because we as humans have sex outside of inception when we're trying to get pregnant.
Of course.
It's a pleasurable experience. It's supposed to be pleasurable.
Mhm.
And what we're finding is women throughout the life cycle, from young girls all the way through menopause, are experiencing discomfort, anything from slight discomfort to pain severe enough to not allow them to have sex at all, and are just, first of all, they don't want to talk to their physicians about it. They're too embarrassed. When they ask their physicians about it, the physicians don't know what to do about it.
Mhm.
So it has become this unspeakable problem that has been addressed by physical therapists. I mean, we've been addressing it. I went into practice back in the dark ages. We've been talking about it for a very long time. And fortunately, now around the world, there are more physios who are talking about it. But it really is, and it kind of eludes what Elizabeth was talking to. When we have patients or clients in front of us, our goal is to really listen, to hear
Okay.
what's going on, to hear what they say, to
Mhm.
hear what their whole entire history has been from the beginning until where we are right now, because it all compounds and makes them who they are.
Mhm.
It shouldn't hurt. Maybe
No.
they have back pain. Maybe they have hip pain. Maybe they have a bladder dysfunction or a bowel dysfunction. Or
Mhm.
maybe when they were a child, they had recurrent urinary tract infections and had urethral dilations for 3 years. I mean, all of those things can leave us in this spot where, if you just look at it from a physical perspective, there's no reason.
Mhm. Why?
Vulvodynia, with as many as 8 to 16% of women have a chronic vulvar pain condition called vulvodynia, and by definition is vulvar pain at the opening of the vagina that has no identifiable cause.
Mhm.
It's a real deeply held secret. There are so many women who are suffering from pain, vulvar pain, pain with sex. They don't talk about it. There are many women young girls as well, who have stopped going to see a gynecologist because the speculum hurts upon insertion. Both
Oh.
Dee and I, through the course of our practices, we've heard that many girls and women have stopped using tampons
Or could
Oh.
never use them.
and
Right.
never, because
my
it hurts. And
goodness.
so it's a really, really big statistic.
Yeah.
At some point in their lives, 73% of women
Mhm.
report pain with sex. And I just want to put in a qualifier here, because We have kink. We have the BDSM world.
Yes.
What we're talking about is unwanted sexual pain, unwanted pain with intercourse. If you're into kink and you're into, being slapped and paddled or whatever,
Yeah.
that's consensual.
Yes.
And that's wanted pain in the lifestyle of kink or role playing. So it's unwanted sexual pain. It hurts. And there are a lot of people who don't know that that is actually not normal. As Dee said earlier, sex shouldn't hurt.
No, it shouldn't. Yes, and that's actually very sad to hear that actually some women actually experience these things. I can't even imagine. And then obviously that comes with shame and embarrassment because they're like, oh, well, this person's telling me how an amazing sexual, experiences she's having. And then I'm here and I can't even put a tampon in. So that can cause a lot of insecurities too. So that's great with the work that you're doing. So really, when it comes to why, what do you think is a big factor of why they do have experiencing pain?
We can go everywhere from, in the medical model, from all the things that I said to you.
Yeah.
You could have been a child who had recurrent urinary tract infections.
Then
you could have been a child who had urgency. Your mom made you go to the bathroom before you left the house, and when you were out, you went to every bathroom that you were in because you had bladder dysfunction.
Okay.
You may have had bowel dysfunction. When you were a kid, you may have fallen off a sled or a bike and landed on your tailbone and could hardly walk.
Wow.
Bodies don't forget those things. Now that's way back. If we go forward, lots of it the vulvodynia parts, oftentimes we can identify where things have come from, but that's not always the case.
Okay.
If we go forward and away from the chronic pain problems, we look at new moms. It's not uncommon for new moms to have pain with sex.
Yep.
And the list of that is from having a baby, having a new child. And if a new mom is nursing, her estrogen levels are in the cellar. Her estrogen levels are so low, she has very little desire. And with those low estrogen levels, her body doesn't produce estrogen, so she doesn't get lubricated. Her arousal doesn't work as well. She can't get as aroused. She has a physical problem in the vulva, in the vagina itself. That can be a problem. If we look at from perimenopause on, again, when estrogen levels start to drop, our vaginas become very dry.
Okay.
They don't produce as much mucus.
Okay.
We don't have as much inward desire. So we really have to work hard. That doesn't mean that we become totally asexual, because we know that that isn't the case. But physiologically, that's kind of what happens. I mean, we're mammals, and most mammals, after they finish childbearing, it doesn't matter, and they die. We as humans get to live on a wonderfully long life, and can continue to have arousal, can continue to have desire, and can continue to have pleasure. But it's not just an inbred kind of thing. Not everybody has an appreciation for really how important it is.
So what Dee was describing, and this is why we think we're such a perfect pair, Dee was describing some of the things that actually happen in the body.
Yes.
So my job as a former therapist is to look at what's happening in the mind, what's happening with our emotions. If somebody was physically abused, sexually abused, if a person grew up with a very strict religious household, that since the day that they actually learned what sex, what that is, they were ashamed, they were told it was dirty, they were told, you will find the locks changed if you come home from prom pregnant. All of these different things, they sink into the mind. So there's a part that the mind takes over and shuts down the body. So Dee was speaking about the physical parts. I'm talking about the emotional parts. And that also includes what's going on in our relationships. So all of these outside factors influence our ability to be revved up and juiced up. For instance, pre-COVID, let's just say that your partner traveled 5 days out of the week And so you're kind of angry every time they left the house because they left you with all the chores, the bills, the new puppy, children, a child got diarrhea, all that laundry, all that stuff that could happen when you're alone. And many more scenarios could come up. And then you're kind of angry when they come back. So what's happening in the relationship? It's a multi-factored thing. It's very, us being sexual is a very, very wonderfully complex puzzle. So that D&I holistically, we look at the entire person to find out what's going on in order to try and alleviate the pain.
Yes, amazing, which is great. And then also when we were looking on your website, which is amazing, was that us as women also, we look at porn, or we see porn, we see, what we think a vagina is supposed to look like. And then, so it causes a lot of insecurities with actually how it looks. It doesn't look like it looks like on TV. Let's be honest here. Okay. So you also deal with women that also have insecurities about that causes them to have issues in the bedroom with their partner in that way as well, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, first we have overall body shame. Are my boobs the right height? Are my boobs the right perkiness? Is my butt too big? Yeah. My flabby stomach after a baby. So all of those, when we take it down to the genitals, there actually is a separate self-esteem scale related to the genitals. Now, I will say that this is affecting not just those with vulvas, but it also affects those with cocks, because we're sold through porn that if you don't have a cock like this,
yes,
that's, ready to go.
Yes.
It causes shame. Genital self-esteem is a big source of shame. However, as you noticed on our website, we talk a lot about something that's called labiaplasty. And that's where a young woman or girl or woman voluntarily goes in to have her labia and or her clitoral hood reshaped and resized to meet what's a societal norm of neat and tidy. Okay, so Matt, I'm going to turn to you.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. We're out here and you're in a fajita. Thanks for having me over to the barbecue. I'm kind of noticing you're hanging a little low to the left. You might want to think about going and getting that snipped and tucked up. How do you feel about that?
Well, it would make me feel abnormal, right? You'd start questioning if you're okay. Where does this come from?
And I've just told you that the solution is to snip something down there.
Yeah.
Ludicrous to ask anybody, unless it's for a medical reason. And listen, I should actually come back. If a young girl or woman is making an informed decision, and it is her choice based on knowing that there is no such thing as one normal vulva. We come in diverse shapes and sizes, same as your nose, my nose. I have 3 sisters. My nose is different as the day is long from my other 3 sisters, same mother, same father.
Good point.
I'm a sex educator. The day of my wedding, somebody had to hold my dress up. It was my sister. And when she was down there, I started to get curious about what her inner lips, what her vulva looked like. So we had all had enough vodka that I said, go get the other 2. And my sister's like, what are you talking about? And we were in a big, huge stall.
Okay.
And we had our phones with flashlights on. And my sister's average age, I was married later in my life, average age of about 48. We all took a look at each other's vulvas, and they were beautiful, different, exquisite. And it was definitely one of the many highlights of my wedding day. We're all normal. We're all beautiful. We're all normal.
So empowering,
Yeah, and let's talk about that website a bit. Okay. So it's called vulvalove.com. So how did you two get together to start this? Was this your first business together, or do you have others? Because you mentioned you had 3 businesses, so let's talk a bit about
we
that.
do have 3 businesses, and
I'll let
as I mentioned earlier, I had a private practice. Well, I may have not. I had a private practice in the Chicago metro area for over 26 years, and I had just retired.
Mhm.
And I'd retired in June 4 years ago, and 4.5 years ago, and my husband and I had moved to a lake, and I was sitting out on our property looking out at the lake. We were expecting our 3rd grandchild in 2 weeks, and
Okay.
Miss Elizabeth called and said, "So what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I just retired." She said, "Well, I have something I want to prove. Can you help me prove it?" And it's basically what she was just talking about. Can you help me prove that size and shape in both males and females matters in how they function sexually? I said, "Well, of course, we can prove anything." And I said, "Yes." And that was truly the very beginning of what we have done. Vulva Love is the first of those ventures. I'll let Elizabeth talk about our newest, but that was our first venture. Along with that, not long after, came the Center for Genital Health and Education, genitalhealth.org. And that is a non-traditional research facility. No bricks or mortars aren't there. This is our goal is to reframe the conversation around arousal, pleasure, pain, and sex. So it's looking at sex in the bedroom rather than in a research lab, where our goal is to really do some really basic sexual research, because we have no clue about so much of what goes on from a sexual perspective other than what's done in the labs. So we stay quite busy. I'll let Elizabeth introduce our latest, which is the pleasure movement.
Mhm.
But I will go back to something that is a source of a lot of shame. And so when Dee said that I called her, which I did, to help me prove that size and shape do matter,
Okay.
what I wanted to prove, I wanted to see if the shape and size of a woman's labia, clitoral hood, the size of her clitoris, if that mattered, and if there was a difference in terms of how she likes to be pleasured and what her buildup of her arousal cycle is.
And
I might be able to more clearly clarify this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. With a cock body. So some cocks are there's a term out there called grower, not a shower.
a shower, yeah.
And then there are those that are the chosen to be photographed in porn. So does somebody who has a very long cock, do they like the feel of the in and out of the vaginal canal?
Yeah.
Well, the grower,
Mhm.
not the shower, might he really be turned on by the grinding? He doesn't get much he doesn't, if he's shorter, he doesn't, thank goodness this is on video as well. He doesn't get as much enjoyment as someone who's really long. So the thrusting might not be as pleasurable as the grinding on the vulva. So that's what I meant by, can you help me? I want to prove it. And that's one of the reasons why we started our own center, was to take our research basically in our own hands. So I just wanted to really clarify. So then the same with women. If somebody has no clitoral coverage, do they like to be
Probably not.
rubbed and bugged?
In fact, most women think that is the spot
Yeah.
for arousal and orgasm, which is not the case. But
No
is
way.
it too painful? And
Probably.
then someone who has a lot of clitoral coverage, can they take more direct contact there? So that's what I meant by my hypothesis is that there are different arousal cycles and different ways that everybody, we're not one.
True.
So that's what I meant by helping me prove that the road to arousal and climax is not just one script. And so That's what
And it's ongoing, by the way. We don't have
Okay.
the results yet. We
Okay.
are starting with some really basic science stuff, looking at orgasm itself, and how female bodies respond, and what we're seeing from a physiological and from a psychochemical perspective. But our goal is to get to that spot. We're starting with women, but we eventually will. We'll do some research with men as well.
Amazing.
So to summarize, you're kind of like looking into the blueprint for different shapes and different sizes and different, like, I would say genital setup, right? To see if you can map certain pleasure and arousal to the same kind of thing, to figure out some sort of
For better pleasure, like
chart, for
more
better pleasure, exactly. So it's kind of like the erotic blueprint, but for the genital size and shape. And
yeah, and I'm also an erotic blueprint coach. I know you've had many of my fellow peers on. So the blueprints, the way that, there are archetypes, and the way that I'm going about, because I haven't even begun to see if, a certain genital size and shape correlates to any one of the blueprints, because we have actually all of the blueprints within us. It's just what's
you're more drawn to
the most. So it is a system, if you will, an archetypal or a way of categorizing, to see if that archetype or that anatomy corresponds to an arousal cycle. So I think of the blueprints as an archetypal system, and I also think of the genital anatomy, shapes and sizes. It's pretty much, they fall into a cluster of different shapes and sizes. So,
and to be clear, this isn't new.
No.
Size and shape and how it impacts sexual function isn't new.
No.
Kama Sutra from way back talked about different sizes and shapes and different positions and ways to successfully be sexual.
Okay.
So this isn't new information. So it's really trying to put science behind things that people have talked about and have hypothesized about for centuries. So it's really exciting. It's really just really breaking ground on things that have been passé. You couldn't talk about them. Masters and Johnsons had, really put a black scar across sexuality because of the way they did things. So we're really trying to slowly see if we can bring it up and get sexuality research out of the shadows, out of the, back into the bedroom where sex happens.
Yeah, and I think that's really awesome, because the way you're setting that up, it's kind of like you could eventually, if you find enough data and it correlates with one another, that you could be like genital blueprint coach. So then you would have the love language, then you would have the erotic blueprint coach, and then you would have the genital
blueprints.
coaches.
Elizabeth, another.
I think that'd be the ultimate love.
But that would be incredible.
Yes, because that's what it is, right?
That would solve probably a lot of issues.
And it's the language, right? So you're creating a form of language so that people can understand themselves better.
So I want to talk to you about that particular point, Matt. So I sat on a panel, and there were a number of there's a sex educator, a sex therapist, a tantra educator. And when the question of size and shape came up, a young man, so we were at a college campus, he stood up and he was next to his partner, who was shaking.
Aww.
And he said, I am going to be honest in front of some of my classmates and my beautiful girlfriend.
Okay.
But our sex hurts. It hurts her.
Oh.
And we love each other and we don't know what to do. So I asked if he were willing to be more open with me. And he said yes, he consented. And so did she. And he said that he was rather girthy, and also long. And then when I asked her, because of her inserting her own fingers to feel her depth from the opening of the vagina to where her cervix is. She identified herself as very short. She was never able to use the extra long, extra thick tampons.
Oh,
So
interesting.
did they need to break up?
No.
And I said, heavens, no. You love each other.
Yes.
There are many other ways to have, if you want, successful and penetrative penis and vagina sex that feels really, really good. You just have to make some adjustments.
Mhm.
So we talked about different shapes, different positions. Doggy style actually is one of the ones that shortens the vaginal canal. And so
Oh.
I said, maybe for right now, the doggy style isn't good for you, unless you put a bumper or your hand or you're holding
A
on
spacer.
to the, yes.
Oh,
well, there
holding
are-
on to, yes. Good
To the
And-
base of the
idea.
penis. Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And Matt, you laughed. There are such things as spacers.
No,
Because-
I'm laughing because it's a quick solution that fixes. You can go as deep as.
Yeah,
it's a
my
spacer.
idea was called the thumper bumper, but somebody
Yeah.
came up with something instead. That's like $1 million business that never happened.
Yeah.
So what I did with this young couple was that I
Yes.
helped them understand that there are different ways that she could, when she wanted, contain more of his size. And then I also, and this is where pleasure movement comes in, I also started to question her about her arousal. Are you really ready to be penetrated? Do you feel all juiced up and jazzed up and really just aching, if you will, to have something inside? And if it's 5 or below, don't go there.
Mhm.
If it's above and you're just craving something, that's when actually Dee can tell you
Mhm.
that the shape and the size of the vaginal canal and what happens to the cervix and the uterus, it changes with arousal.
Wow.
And so, Dee, do you want to use our favorite term?
I had no idea. That's amazing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Our favorite term. Oh, premature penetration.
Premature.
Yeah. I had no clue what you're talking about. Yes. I've actually used it in a couple of talks. I'm very fortunate to be able to be a speaker and trying to educate physicians. Try as we might, it's an uphill battle. But I've started ending my talks with a slide that actually has a red circle with a cross through it, and the words behind the cross are premature penetration. And people kind of look and kind of scratch their heads. We didn't come up with it. A sexuality educator did. But the goal is really not to have anything penetrate a vagina sexually until that arousal, as Elizabeth described, is juicy, till your desire is so high and everything is so ready that what happens is the muscles on the inside, the pelvic floor muscles that help support the uterus and the bladder and the bowel for that matter, pulls up and in, and that pulls it up a little bit. What also happens is in positions, Elizabeth was talking about positions. I could pull down one of my models up there. That may be a little too much for you, but if instead of going forward, if you think of a man being on top, if his penis goes forward, it's actually going to hit the urethra, the bladder, and the cervix. However, if he points more back, he can actually miss the cervix. The rectum is down here. He can actually miss the cervix, and there's more room. So as that desire is there, the arousal is peaked, and everything is ready, and you have some sense of anatomy and how to figure things out and go slowly, you can most of the time find a path. Again, sometimes I've also had the male counterpart keep their hand on the penis to keep that protected, or the woman, either one can do it, and really go slowly to figure it out and be in the right spot so that there's nothing. The last thing that we want is discomfort, and that's where we really empower every woman we ever talk to, and I did in my practice, is you're in control.
Mhm.
You have to let your partner know. And we know from the studies that have been done that men want that obviously to happen. They don't want to hurt the women that they love, that they're having sex with. So we know that if she's in control, and she has to decide when it's okay and when it's not okay.
And
But
we're also big fans of the quickie. So there's nothing wrong with the quickie if it's by choice.
Yeah.
And what we tell our clients is that make sure you have your lube handy.
lots of lube.
Because that, if we only have time and somebody's going off for, again, post-COVID for a 5-day vacation, or not vacation, work week, and we just want to have that connection. Adequately lubricate so that things are more comfortable during a quickie. But what we are advocating for is to have your repertoire be expanded, your arousal state to be higher before you welcome anything inside the vagina. Not talking about a tampon or a speculum.
Right.
During sexual activity.
Right.
And by that, you mean that if a woman's more aroused, then directly she'll be more lubricated. So then she will experience most likely no pain
And it was common for me to suggest to my women with pain in my practice to also stimulate clitoral stimulation to orgasm before penetration. Because that helps to open up the size of the vaginal, the size of the vagina. The pelvic floor muscles actually will relax and the opening gets a little bit bigger. And as I always say, and after you have an orgasm, everything in the world is better. Right?
Of course, absolutely.
So we need to, I did everything I could in my practice to try to reintroduce the importance of that pleasure. That sex was incredible. Sex with a partner, with a spouse, with a lover is one of the most important, intimate things that we do. But it shouldn't be done. We're preaching this. It happens all the time. It shouldn't be done through pain just because. So the ideal is to get to that point that you both want it, and that it's the way it should be, and there's pure pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So from my understanding, you ladies together work to assess the whole situation, to provide exercises, tools. You're not giving them pills. You're fixing them inside and out, from the mental to what's going on with their body, with their past, and everything to allow them to have a better sexual experience and to experience more pleasure. So I think that's very important to mention, that you have all the tools other than the pills and all of that, which is actually something you stay away from in your practice, from what I've read, which is amazing, because you're actually fixing stuff at its core. Sorry.
But let me just interrupt you, because we don't fix anything.
You work with them to fix
it. Because it doesn't work. I mean, as a physical therapist, people always come, fix me. Well, with this kind of stuff, what I think with most PT, our job is to strategize with, and Elizabeth and I do this with all the people we're now with, strategize to figure out ways that they can help themselves and make themselves better. Because if they don't have the tools that they need, they've already lost control of so much.
Yeah.
I want to give that control back to them. And if if I am fixing them, I'm not achieving that goal. So it's very important for both of us to figure out strategies to get them out of the pain and into the pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We know that pain inhibits pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
It's our hypothesis, and what we see in that is that pleasure can inhibit pain.
Yeah, it goes vice versa, right?
It goes vice versa.
Okay.
So if we dip out of a little bit of the pain, and then if we talk about orgasm, have you guys done any research of, like, let's just say a woman or a man can, orgasm with themselves or with not, but can never with a partner? Is there something autonomy to, like, why you're not really having an orgasm?
That's a good
or
question.
you know what I mean is my question, or mentally there, why you can orgasm with yourself, but you can't really orgasm with your partner?
And maybe you've seen that as well.
Have you seen that? Is it very common? Can you go more in depth as to why? If it's in a medically, or just mentally, or both?
So
Elizabeth?
So I don't know, we'll address a number of different points. So
Okay.
there may be some shame at exhibiting pleasure in front of a partner. The way that they twitch or moan from a previous partner might have been called out as unattractive. Their genitals might have been called dirty or smelly. So there's that piece that it makes it easier when we're by ourselves. Now, there's also the fact that most women do not climax with penis and vagina sex alone.
True.
So if
actually a small percentage,
it's more than 70 some odd percent of women do not reach climax with penis and vagina sex. It's because the clitoris and the entire clitoral network need to be aroused and engorged. That's where most of our climaxes come from. So if you're doing a down and quick, down and dirty quickie, your arousal level in order to reach orgasm your arousal threshold hasn't been met.
Okay.
It may be a position, again, based on the size and shape. Some women have the clitoris very, very close to their vaginal opening. Oh. So when the cock goes in and out, actually the clitoris is stimulated. But other vulvas, the vaginal opening is way down here, and here's their clitoris, which isn't getting hit. So there's no
the glands isn't getting hit.
The clitoral gland,
the bulbs and the legs are getting hit.
Yeah,
which is another piece of the pie.
You're right. The interior clitoris is getting in stimulated. But we think that if we could educate more people about the structure and the entirety of the clitoral network, there may be more likelihood that they reach climax during penis and vagina sex. Are they ready? Are they adequately aroused? Is their clitoris being stimulated? Can they move in a position where they can reach their clitoris? Can they move in a position where their partner can reach their clitoris? Or can they use some kind of vibrator, one of the two of them? So this is why both Dee and I, first and foremost, were educators, to educate people about the amazingness of their own bodies and how they fit together. Because I would be hard pressed to believe anybody that would say, you two don't work, because you've already heard the blueprints. You learn to feed the other person's blueprint as they learn to feed yours. There may be a mismatch until we educate them. Yes. So if we educate you first, Jodi, about the structure of your own anatomy, and you get really, not saying that you're not, but I'm just using you as an example.
Yeah.
How it works, and you find out, and you're an explorer about your own pleasure. And then you teach Matt. You're the best teacher of how you like to receive pleasure. So if we can get couples, moresomes, which is, people in poly relationships, if we start with the individual, then they can share that exciting news and their arousal with their partners. But it's very, very common that women do not reach climax with vaginal penetration alone.
Okay.
And it's completely normal. You've probably heard these three words: nobody's bad, nobody's wrong, nobody's broken. They just, what they learned in whatever grade they learned about sex, that really wasn't about sex. That was about how not to get pregnant and how not to die from a disease. That's not sex. That's not pleasure forward. That's a word that we've coined. That's not pleasure forward education.
That's what we learned at school. That's what I learned when I was a teenager. Sure. Just like wear a condom and don't get an STI and don't get pregnant. That's it.
Yeah. Well, so did you also hear about wet dreams?
No.
And then he woke up a little boy and he was all ashamed that he had one. He told me his story. We talk about this stuff all the time.
What is this? I was having an orgasm in my sleep. Then I wake up and obviously there was semen everywhere when I was a kid. Well,
Yes, of
teenager, and I'm like,
course.
what's going on? It felt good.
Aw.
Now it's awkward. It's weird. My mom
Yeah.
will see my bed sheets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
it isn't that interesting though that it's awkward, it's and you're ashamed and we're guilty about it.
yeah.
Again, that's the whole goal of reframing how we talk about this, because it's
Yes.
normal. It's absolutely
Yes.
normal to have that happen, just like morning
Yeah.
erections are totally completely normal.
Of
Yeah.
They're not
course.
that you're having sexy dreams and you're not dreaming about who you're sleeping with. That has nothing to do with it. It's a
No.
physiological response.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
think there's
I
actually a
just want to add,
problem when you don't have any, right? This is when
right. I mean,
hormones might be low
and
or something.
right. And in
Yeah.
working with men post prostatectomy, when they've
Mhm.
removed the prostate, um,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we look at in recovery.
Yeah.
That we start seeing morning erections, then we know that the blood flow is there, the things that, so
Amazing.
we know that there's a chance in those who feel that they have erectile dysfunctions otherwise, and that's what we're working on, that we can begin to see some improvement as they get those morning erections.
Okay.
I just want to add a couple of quick things of
Yeah,
what
go for it.
Elizabeth just said.
Of course.
Of course.
Anything you
Um,
want to say, go for it.
Yeah. I love this.
It wasn't uncommon for me. All of these, so many of these young women I had, and I would go through. I mean, I'd ask them about everything. I mean, we'd talk about sex, we'd talk about pee, we'd talk about poop. At the end of my assessment, they'd look at me and said, I had never told anybody all of this stuff before. I
Yeah.
can't believe you were asking me all these questions. But oftentimes I'll ask them if they've ever been orgasmic, and they'll tell me no.
Okay.
And then when we get on down in the interview and we're talking more about what happens when they have sex, I find out that they masturbate, they self-pleasure all the time, but don't consider that orgasm.
Oh.
Now, that mindset when you
Whoa.
get with a partner is, well, why would I do that? He's going to think I don't need him if I do that. My goal of always saying try to have an orgasm before you have sex was one of the hardest things that I had to get across to my patients, because women were too embarrassed, they were too ashamed, and they were too afraid their partners were going to think they weren't needed. And to the second point is, Elizabeth and I were at a presentation at Indiana University, and we were talking about female sexual function and what women feel. If you're doing a survey and say, well, how is it what makes your sex successful? And we knew the results of the survey, and we kind of went around the room and had people stand up. And we had one young girl, one college student, because this was on a college campus, one college student stand up and say, well, sex is successful if my male partner has an orgasm. And we know that from there's been studies with younger women today, because of all of the craziness, with the increase of porn, with the increase of oral sex, male oral sex, with all of the openness in that women have grown up in an era of male satisfaction. Now, that's not just this group, trust me, but this is just who I'm addressing right now. That sexual satisfaction and sexual success is only the male orgasm. I mean, and when you stop and think about it, what is sex? How do we define sex?
Good point.
Right? And whether it's with male-female sex, whether it's male-male sex, whether it's female-female sex. But is it ever where both partners are fully pleasured? Do you ever hear that as a definition for sex?
No.
And in a traditional model, it's when it's penis and vagina orgasm, and when the male does it, then sex is done. It's done. So that's another one of our battles. Elizabeth was talking about pleasure. Elizabeth, can I introduce the book at this point?
Sure. And the new website. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you go on to I gave you that.
Yeah, go for it.
I've just gotten word, hopefully by mid-February to early March, Elizabeth and I will be publishing our first book.
Awesome.
The title of which is The Pleasure Prescription.
Okay.
Surprising approach.
Yeah.
Thank you. To healing sexual pain. And in that book, we take women through the process of going from pain and picking up and gaining that pleasure. There are 3 sections in the book. The first 2 sections are dedicated just to the woman herself. She doesn't have to have a partner to go through these processes. It really is about finding her own sensuality first, what feels good in her body, and then how to have that sensuality in her life every day, and then how to build that into her sexuality. And once she's found her own pleasure, the last section is about if they want to take it to a partner. It's about communication. It's about touching, and it's about consent. At the end of each chapter, we have a list of prescriptions of things that the reader can do to integrate what we've talked about in that chapter. We're extremely excited about it. Quite frankly, we can't wait till it's published because we've been working on it for a very long time.
Amazing.
So yeah, we're really quite excited about that.
No, that's great. Congrats on that.
Yes.
How hard is it to write together? Are you writing a chapter each? Like, I mean, how do you go about that? Because it's hard enough to be a writer on your own. How hard it is to be a collaboration writer like both of you are doing.
Much harder.
I'm going to go first. Fortunately, Dee and I think so much alike. Okay. It was really fun. There was one part, and it was because of me. It was one part where things got a little difficult. I was not really open to Dee's suggestion, shall we say. Okay. Was it only one? Yeah, I think it was one. See, we even disagree on how many. I was pretty clear. I think I definitely, Dee, in that one that I remember, the collaboration, my desire to put the particular words won out over the collaboration. We did so much of this writing sitting side by side that we would look at each other and we'd say, okay, it's a break. Whether it was an M&M break or going out on a walk, or as she said earlier, well, it was a pleasure break. What can we do to break the cycle of Yeah. So we would insert pleasure. Dee lives by a lake. You go out her backyard and however many feet later, you could actually plunge down deep into that lake. And so just going outside and taking a pleasure breather, we actually were still as thick as thieves. We are bestest of all friends. And I think that there may be pairs that didn't fare as well as we did through the writing process. And I think it's a testament of, I know Dee is the expert in her field, dealing with pain and eliminating and diminishing that pain in all bodies. What a success she is there. I got to tell you, I go into a medical conference with her and everyone's like, oh, there's Dee. There's, like she's a rock star. Am I making you blush? You need more blush. Yes. She's an internationally sought after speaker. And so I might have changed a little wording or suggested she changed wording so that it wasn't so clinical. So somebody like us three could understand it. Like if she pulled out the diagram of what she wanted to put in the book with all the muscles and all the labels of the pelvis, I about died.
Yeah. And
I think Dee feels the same way about what I bring from the mental and emotional. And it was a great collaboration.
No, that's awesome. Congrats on that. This is so exciting.
It is.
We'll definitely grab a copy of that book.
Totally.
Oh no, I'll send you one.
We'll send you one.
Okay, thank you.
You guys are awesome.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. So I had a question just in regards to orgasm. We were talking about female orgasm, right? So would you say that the G-spot is an extension of the clitoris? Because some women identified as vaginal and they get orgasm through the vagina, and others are more clitoris focused. Are both of them connected? What's a proper orgasm? What happens if you get a woman that just gets vaginal orgasms or only clitoris orgasms, and she wonders if something's wrong with her? Can you get both? Like, let's elaborate on this a bit.
Yeah, I'm going to take one point and then I'm going to have Dee describe. There's no such thing as a proper orgasm. An orgasm is an orgasm is an orgasm. Take it, run with it, have fun with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
What happens is how they're sourced and what area needs to be stimulated.
Okay.
So Dee will talk about what's all involved in that neighborhood down there. I mean, Indiana is next to Illinois, but they're all part of the United States. So I'll let Dee take it from here in regards to the neighborhood and what's actually getting.
Let's take a tour in the neighborhood.
Why not, right?
Yeah.
Well, first I just need to describe the clitoris, which is in science terms very new. When we think about the clitoris, we do really just think about the glands, as Elizabeth does it, the glands that just comes out at the top.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's actually an incredible organ that the glands goes up to the body, and it has two little legs that come around and encircle the vaginal opening. And inside that, there are two vestibular bulbs. There she has it. There it is right there, that lovely little thing.
Yes,
but what also happens at the top, where the glands is, where the outside piece is, it has a little body that goes back.
Mm-hmm.
And underneath that body is the urethra, interestingly.
Okay.
When you hear the G-spot, and us in the medical world are a little skeptical of the G-spot. We don't really know, what is the G-spot? Is it really a female prostate? And right at this point, the literature is very inconclusive, but there is some thought that it could be the female prostate there.
Okay.
The jury's still out. It's my sense that if you get a full enough arousal, and when that arousal happens, the clitoris, like the penis, because it's the female penis, right, enlarges and engorges just like the penis does. The vestibular glands, they're very vascular, they get very plump. And when those vestibular glands and those legs get plump, they put pressure on the outside walls of the vagina. So that when an erect penis comes in, the pressure is pushed more upward. And when that pressure is pushed more upward, where the urethra sits and where the urine comes out, the urethra is right here, that clitoral neck comes all the way back. And it's my sense that it's pressure on that back part of the clitoris that's happening. And from an anatomical perspective, which is where all of my background comes from, that makes a lot of sense. Now, it's I don't know. I mean, 20 to 30% of women supposedly from the literature are orgasmic with intercourse. Are they also orgasmic with clitoral stimulation? I would suggest probably. I don't know that this is a problem with sexuality research. You have to use a validated questionnaire. And if you haven't gotten a validated questionnaire, then you can't ask the questions that you want to ask. So this is part of our quest, is to create questions and get answers to things that everybody wonders about, but nobody will ask because they're not truly validated in the scientific method to what we really want to find out. How does it happen? And that's one of those things that we really, really want to look at and see. When these people who have vaginal orgasms, they have orgasm with penis in the vagina sex, how aroused are they? How much lead up is there to that? Do they do any clitoral gland stimulation before that penetration? There's a lot of women who can have penis in the vagina sex and stimulate the stimulate their own clitoris and have an orgasm. Now, is that penis in the vagina orgasm? Is that clitoral orgasm? Elizabeth says it. Who cares? Right?
Exactly.
As long as we get it.
Yes.
I would like to know, as a scientist, I would like to know why the heck it happens and how it happens, because that's just my background. So these are all questions that we really just, nobody has asked.
This actually is this is a part in the book where we actually have a really healthy and robust debate. We did so before putting this in here. So from my perspective, since I've studied Tantra, certified Tantra educator, I've studied other methods of stimulating the vagina internally. There in some women, there is a spot that engorges and potentially fills with fluid, so that when that is expressed, women are known to release fluid It's called female ejaculate. There is a sex researcher and sex educator who has actually had the fluid that is released during that type of stimulation. She's had it analyzed. There is tiny little bits and traces of urine, much like with semen. You got one tube to deliver semen and urine. They're finding small little bits of urine in there, but it is some type of fluid that is different than straight pee. So here I want to be the scientific literature is still debating it. We've got Beverly Whipple, who I know is over. I'm pretty sure she's in her 80s, and she's retired. She's retired. She and one of her partners, not lover partners, neuroscientists. They studied this. So Beverly Whipple has a lot of writing out there about the G-spot and what happens when it's stimulated. Deborah Sundall has had the fluid also analyzed, as I think so has Beverly. We have people in our client base that have come to us that said, this really weird thing happened to me when I was on, it was a summer vacation, and there was a boy that I met, and we were in the back of his dad's car, and it was so exciting, and I peed on the back seat. And now I'm just so afraid to have, my husband, he's learned about what this thing is, female ejaculation, and I don't know if it's the same. And so we always both of us come at it with an open curiosity. People in the Tantra world, it seems to be, and it's written about in ancient cultures, they're the nectar of the gods. It's called Amrita. You can see in some of the beautiful drawings of old Asia that they're holding a cup underneath, and that nectar was reserved for the kings and for the gods of these ancient societies. So again, it's not new, but it hasn't been as robustly explored and investigated from a science and a research perspective. That could be something down the road that we look at, because if a woman thinks that she's peeing and her partner, male, female, the partner,
they think it's great.
Well, it depends. Some people think it's great, and some people think
partners think it's great. The male, I will say male partners think it's great, typically, because it's like, oh, look at that.
Yeah.
That was
finger special. Like,
and
I made her ejaculate. I'm good.
Yeah. And it is, it's a skill. I've practiced Tantra, and from all the women I know who wanted to explore whether or not they had that capacity, I might be hard pressed to think of one or two whose bodies did not remember that they had the capacity to do so. So that's, again, it's from the science part and from, ancient teachings. That's where Dee and I come together really nicely. And it's up to that person to explore, but not if it's, not if they don't desire to do that and explore it themselves, because it can be quite painful if that person is just learning and thrusting and not, there's no arousal there anyway.
Yeah.
It can hurt, and we don't want pain. We want pleasure.
Yes, of course.
But I think that's a good answer to come back to my question, right? There's no normal orgasm. Figure out your own body, explore, find out what feels good. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, who cares? Don't put pressure. Yeah,
absolutely,
have fun.
Jodi. Yeah.
And that's the important part here. It's all about fun and discovering your body. And that's part of the fun, right? To feel new sensations, try new things, to see if you can maybe have a new orgasm or new reaction. Or
and you know what, Matt, that's so hard for so many people, because we just get in grooves. We just get in ruts. Just do it. Let's just do it. Either the kids are there or you're too tired. And now with working couples, the fatigue levels are just over the top, or we have to go out with our friends, or we have to watch this Netflix, or we have to watch this series. The time left that's needed for that time, it takes time for that arousal to happen, is just kind of kicked to the side.
So
My
then there's
unfortunately.
no more, there's no more time allocated to that, and you rush through it, and that's probably
Right.
the reason the pain
Yeah.
comes forward.
Yeah. And it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think
And
it's really
we're
important.
not just talking about those that were born with. All bodies can use a refresher, a pleasure refresher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Matt allowed
All
Jodi
ages.
to be the adventurer and the explorer of what's possible in your body as well, because your capacity is just as rich and just as deep as hers, but we very rarely explore that in a cock body, because we've been sold one orgasm. Orgasm has to happen with a stiff, hard cock and ejaculate. That's simply just not true. There's
Yeah, no,
so
I agree.
much pleasure available in the nuances and subtleties of our bodies, but it takes time you have to set aside that time to explore it. And really, more importantly, allow yourself to be that vulnerable.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. To be vulnerable and comfortable, so
Yes.
that together you can explore. And I think that having those conversations, even though people might think it's not sexy or something, it's actually what's gonna bring your sex life as a couple to the next
Better.
level.
Yeah.
If
Right.
you have those conversations, oh, that feels good, that doesn't feel good, instead of just making faces and somebody has to figure out what's not working.
Or
Right. And that conversation happens outside of the bedroom.
Yeah.
We start those conversations before we take our clothes off, because sometimes they can get a little confrontational, right?
Yep.
And you have to set, and we talk about this a lot in the book, in the consent chapter and the communication chapter, that you really have to set some rules and listen to each other and respect each other's comments, and talk about it before you get there, and then go, take your clothes off, and as you said, have fun. Jodi, have fun with it. There's no success, there's no fail. It's all exploration. It's all just playing around. I mean, we've talked about playing around forever. It's just playing around. It may end in orgasms for one or both of you, and it may not. But if there's pleasure involved, if it feels good along the way, then you're learning how to build that pleasure in, and that orgasm isn't the be all end all, because it's so much more. There's so much more that we can get out of that entire experience.
Yeah.
Do we have time to talk about the pleasure movement? We have no idea how much time we have.
Yeah.
Oh, and you have all the time in the world.
problem.
I mean, well, I think just to finish on that point, the important part is to take the pressure away.
Yes.
And we always put pressure on ourselves. Oh, she didn't have an orgasm, or vice versa.
Or vice
he
versa.
didn't ejaculate, so I'm not good enough. Or he's not as hard as he should be in a movie, so he doesn't like me. And it becomes more stressful than actually pleasurable. And I think that in today's society, people put so much focus on results and success, and they need to have the desired outcome out of a situation. If they don't, it's a failure. Well, it's simply not true.
No.
They can build up to actually have the most amazing sex of their lives, but they have to start from somewhere, like riding a bicycle. You're gonna fall, you're gonna scratch your knee. It's not gonna be perfect. Eventually you're gonna do wheelies. You're gonna ride on one wheel and do some tricks and stuff. So I think that's
there's actually science behind what you just said. So we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
In order for us to build arousal, for our arousal to build, we have to be down-regulated. We have to actually be swimming around in the parasympathetic nervous system. So that
parasympathetic is rest and relax.
Yes.
Sympathetic is fight or flight. Right?
Yeah. So what ends up happening is so much, now in COVID, and now all the violence and the things that are just happening in our world, fires. I lived through 3 fires here this summer, and we were evacuated once. So there's just all of this stuff that keeps us up in the parasympathetic fight or flight. What's
sympathetic.
Happening? Sympathetic. So in order for arousal to build, we have to swim. Pleasure is like a wave. We have to ride it, but we have to catch that wave down in the parasympathetic. And we need to ride that wave as our arousal builds. And then when we are about to climax, the shorter breaths. That's when the sympathetic comes in, because the sympathetic is what's needed to go up
Get
and
that
over.
ejaculate response. Yeah.
Yes. So what's happening is we're all starting like goal focused and goal oriented. I'm gonna make her come. Excuse me, that's not your job. And we're both gonna have simultaneous orgasms. That's written about in myths. You have to work at it. But so like we need to be relaxed enough, not with a glass of wine, but hey, take a hot bath together, do something that's down regulating the system so you can actually catch that wave to flip it over into the sympathetic, which is where we reach arousal. So there's science behind what you're saying. How smart you are.
But I think that's important, because you hear people, they do getaways, right? Because they're too busy with the kids or just changing the
Oh my
scenery.
gosh.
That moment that you're just out of your own space, out of your own routine, then either the man or most likely the woman will just lower her like response to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system, and then she can fully relax and enjoy and have a good time and great sex.
Yeah, without anything else in her mind, right?
Yeah, like the kids are getting babysat, or everything's okay. I don't work. I don't have to wake up tomorrow. And then when all of that disappears, then boom, magic happens.
It does.
So.
It's amazing, and I mean, I find it in my kids, the new parents anyway. We have our 13-month-old and 3.5-year-old with us for a couple of weeks, and the mom said, my daughter-in-law said, so I really wouldn't be objectionable at all if you want to transition her, the 13-month-old, into one nap a day. And I chuckled to myself, because we adults don't transition babies into one nap a day. Babies transition themselves into one nap a day.
Yeah, of course.
But I get a big chuckle out of my daughter and daughter-in-laws, because they need to be in control. Exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I want to know what it's going to happen. I want to know when it's going to happen. I have a spreadsheet. I know everything in detail. Well,
that's so true.
Yeah. It's not how this works. And to the point,
it's true though. Hey, my gosh.
She's a mom to be, right? She's already like that. She has her little chart. She starts writing stuff.
I'm like,
you have apps for everything.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
You know what you're supposed to expect. You know what that baby's supposed to do. You know how much they're supposed to sleep. You know how much you're supposed to eat. Who knows?
Yes. And if not, oh my God, then something's wrong with my baby, right? And it shouldn't be that way. It's so true. Everybody's different. Every baby's different. Just sometimes go with the flow and enjoy the process.
Let your body do what it's been doing for a very, very, very long time.
So, and to your point, both Jodi and Matt, think back on your lives, and when you weren't busy, when you weren't working full time on the career or the new baby's room and the crib and all of that. If you think about the times when we used to be able to travel and go on vacation, a lot of pregnancies happen after we get back from vacation. Some people report the best sex of their lives when they're on vacation, because all of the things that clutter us up and take the experience away from what's happening in my body. How can I rest? How can I relax? All of those should be gone when we're on vacation. And so that's why it feels so great. Or when we have a grandma and grandpa watching after the little ones, and we're doing something in the big city, and we have great sex that night. It's because all those distractions, the mind is able to actually quiet down.
Yep, so true.
And it's important to notice that it's always there. It's just that it's us that we're not able to put everything else aside. So if you can master that, then you're gonna actually improve your sex life quite significantly.
And just a quick with this pandemic stuff and working from home, I'm seeing in my kids and you're reading a lot about it, that people who used to work 40 hours a week or maybe even 50 hours a week are now working 60 and 70 hours a week at home. I don't know if you've had that experience or heard or read about it, but that's taking even more time away from downtime. It's crazy stuff.
We actually have research around that too, because we just we're working with a company. We're part of their research platform, and they are releasing data at the Consumer Electronics Show sometime this
Next
month.
week.
Next week.
Next week, probably.
And they're a sex toy company. They have a world-class vibrator. Nonetheless, when the pandemic started, there were sex toy sales went through the roof.
Supposedly, according to the media.
Supposedly went through the roof. But when it ends up from the we're going to analyze the data more after the Consumer Electronics Show. But what this particular vibrator company found was that sessions using this vibrator, because we can track when the vibrators are used, frequency went down.
Wow.
Duration of the sessions was longer, which could potentially mean that it took longer for them to reach climax.
Mhm.
Wow.
And that can possibly be because of increased amounts of stress.
Mhm.
Yes.
Totally.
So
Definitely.
even though, people think that we're home having a lot more sex during the pandemic, this particular company is challenging that assumption.
And yeah, kind of like the opposite. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yep.
But yes, please do speak about your
Yes,
new
your new ventures.
Your new adventure
Oh, yes, please.
together. We wanted to get
Yes,
to that and then we
exactly.
went off guard. But yes, if we want to go back
Go
to
ahead.
that.
Tell us what you're up
Yes.
So I mentioned, pleasure being like a wave. What's happening is pleasures, when people think of pleasure, most typically they think of sexual pleasure.
Mhm.
Well, pleasure is so much more the pleasure of a really deep, rich conversation, the
Mhm.
pleasure of like a divine piece of chocolate, the
Mhm.
pleasure of some very fine French cuisine.
That's
I
true.
didn't do that well. I don't know. That was for you. There's so much more to pleasure. And so what Dee and I have just started is, our book is called The Pleasure Prescription. We wanted to really start a movement focused on pleasure, not just sexual pleasure. Pleasure that you get from smelling the rose, eating the fine
Amazing.
foods. So we started the pleasure movement,
Okay.
and it's all about empowering people to get in touch and harness the pleasure that's in their body. It's all the feel goods, it's all the joy, it's all the happiness that can happen from finger painting, to spending time in the garden, to paying attention to the clothes that you wear. Those types of things we wanted to explore, and we wanted to create a community around this so that more people experience more pleasure in their lives.
Wow.
Throughout the entire pie, not just the piece that's delegated to sex and sexuality. So we started the pleasure movement. The book is about bringing more pleasure into your life. We we've started a pleasure community. So right now it's focused on those who identify as women. So we can really bring the pleasure quotient back up to a much higher place than it is right now. So,
Which is so needed right now with all the pandemic stuff that's going on.
Absolutely.
It's pleasure is
Oh yes,
in the tank.
100%.
So how can people be in touch with you in regards to that? Do you have a website, Pleasure Movement?
We do, pleasuremovement.com.
Okay.
And they'll see that very soon, Dee and I are starting our Pleasure Pushers podcast.
Nice.
So
Amazing.
the pleasure prescription is kind of a little bit of not, we had both come from the medical model in one way or another, and
Yes.
the pleasure prescription was kind of riffing a little bit on the medical model. And so pleasure pushers is, like, we're not pushing pills, as you know, but we're pushing pleasure.
Mhm.
So we're going to have our own podcast called Pleasure Pushers Podcast.
Amazing.
We've started the community. It's a private Facebook community so that like-minded pleasure seekers, somebody in California could learn about what the person in upstate New York is doing around snow and pleasure, and the person in California doesn't even know what snow is.
Yes.
But getting people together in community so that they can share their ideas and they can share where they might have stumbled on their journey. Because community, in now that we're all meeting not face to face, but on Zoom calls,
Yes.
we really wanted to tip the scale into something more enjoyable. So we've got
And
that.
more personable, more personal. This is this is a wonderful venue, but it just is, it loses such contact.
Yeah, we're hoping people
personal.
create little pleasure pods in their own neighborhoods, and maybe they can go and do a hike. Dee and I will be moderating that, and we'll be doing Facebook Lives and sending people on pleasure hunts and pleasure dates with themselves, pleasure dates with a partner should they choose, pleasure dates with their kids, whatever it may be. And then Dee and I, because we work with individuals, we are also selling we also work with people in different packages. We have found that 3 months is just scratching around, swimming around at the tip of the iceberg. But we have 3 month, 6 month, and 9 month packages that people can work with us to really weave both some of our clients have pain and some don't, but we weave together all the gifts of both. I think combined, Dee and I have more than 40 years of experience in working in our fields, and then together for the last 4. So we're finding a lot of success in helping people bring pleasure back to the forefront and help them understand that pleasure and even arousal are not specific to sex alone. No. They're beautiful, fun, enjoyable, fantastic words to repeat daily, multiple times a day, and make that a really strong part of our vocabulary. So that's pleasure movement. It's kind of chunky, but pleasuremovement.com.
Yes.
And Dee and I are reached right now at info@pleasuremovement.com. And we will also, we're working with our web designer to add additional pages on Vulva Love. We can always be found at vulvalove.com.
Okay.
But this is a bigger undertaking because we want pleasure ambassadors to help us spread. What's spread? Help us spread pleasure in their own bodies, in their own families, whatever, in their own friendship groups, in their own communities, and there isn't enough pleasure in our world.
I agree.
No, it's going down.
Oh, it's getting worse and worse, right? So do you have any tips that you could share with us right now for our viewers that are just really lacking that in their life right now?
Yes.
That you could share?
So what do you enjoy doing?
Myself, I love being outside and being physically active.
Okay.
Love it.
Do things that bring you pleasure. So if you're too busy and you typically need to do it or you feel that you need to do it for an hour, then I'm going to challenge you, 5 minutes outside. Can you allow that 5 minutes to bring you as much pleasure as if you hiked or ran for an hour? I know you're pregnant, you're probably not running for an hour anymore.
No.
But if cooking food brings you pleasure, maybe one night, don't do that takeout. I know everybody's busy, but one night, maybe on a weekend, cook enough and take that time off to get those unique ingredients, to savor the smell. The next day, you can even savor some of those smells and make enough so that when you're busy, you enjoy it thoroughly that first night or that first afternoon. And then you keep some frozen as leftovers that will bring you back to that moment of pleasure. How much fun the both of you had exploring the new recipe, perhaps, bringing out an old recipe from a loved one or your favorite online chef. Spending that time recognizing that these are pleasure moments and putting that into your account. That's a deposit into what Dee and I have termed your pleasure account. We still make withdrawals. Like, oh, I banged my head on the cabinet as I was trying to find that saffron.
Yeah.
But I found the saffron and I made this delicious dish. That's a deposit, even though you banged your head. So we want people to make more deposits into, if they can think of a pleasure account. And pleasure can be found in the simplest and shortest of moments.
Yes.
I
It's
agree.
so true.
And remember the five senses: sight, so looking at the blue sky;
Mhm.
smell, the dew in the morning or the rain, impending rain; touch, my gosh, go for it, wherever and however;
Mhm.
sound, listening to the beach or listening to your favorite
Oh,
music,
I know.
right? And
Mhm.
taste all of that luscious, gorgeous food. So there, if you just slow down enough, and I think that's the biggest piece, we just truly have to slow down enough to say,
Yeah.
wow, it's such a gorgeous sky, and that breeze feels so wonderful.
Mhm.
Smell, it's fall, smell those leaves. You know, there's so much in our systems that's built in to build that pleasure.
Mhm.
And go around and experience all of the senses.
Yeah,
Everything
exactly.
that,
Yeah.
everything that you do.
And getting our
Amazing.
faces off our phones so we can
Right?
Well, there's
actually
that
look
too.
around.
Yes, there's that too. Totally.
These things that never ever leave us, that
You have
just
to
are
leave us
there
back
all
to
the
them.
time.
Yeah.
That the little kids can get to places on
I
your
know.
phone.
Oh yeah, and they know everything at 3 years old how to operate it. Like,
It's nuts.
it's crazy.
It's astounding. Once one of my grandkids had my phone, and when I got to it, there was a thing spinning that they had purchased something. I still haven't figured out what they bought. I don't know.
See, like
But
crazy.
in the youngest, I don't care how old they are. My 13-month-old will go and she'll try to change the pictures on the phone.
Unreal.
Wow.
That's another thing, is as much as you can,
Yeah.
leave the technology behind.
Yes.
Yes. From
You
time
know,
to time.
we actually find that we need to schedule moments of pleasure. We're so busy. We schedule when back in the day, we
Mhm.
scheduled when we went to the gym. We knew exactly when we were eating. We
Yep.
schedule our doctor's appointment. We schedule the Zoom call.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so often pleasure and sex gets thrown by the wayside when we can fit it in. Well,
Mhm.
you know what? I'm a sex educator and so is my husband. And there are times when it's like, because we were working on the website, it fell by the wayside. But
Yeah.
when we find that we schedule in Thursday at 2:30, then we are both anticipating it. This is a
Totally.
tip from any sex educator, any sex
Totally.
therapist. Schedule in dates.
Mhm.
Schedule in time for pleasure. And
Mhm.
when you're doing that, better yet, turn the technology off.
Mhm.
Go on that 5-minute walk around the block, leaving the technology behind.
Mhm.
I like to ask people to leave their computers, take their phones, and take their TVs out of the bedroom.
Of the bedroom.
Mhm.
So that can be a sanctuary for the two of you,
Mhm.
and if you're reading a book at night, read it from a hardcover, so that the two of you, or the three of you, however people are configured in their relationships, so that intimacy that happens in the bedroom can be a pleasurable experience rather than connecting one more time at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So make your bedroom a sanctuary where it's just about you and you alone, the intimacy with yourself, if our viewers live alone, or with a partner. Make that a very private and precious place where intimacy, pleasure, arousal, and sexiness.
And fun.
And fun.
Yes.
Yeah, if this isn't fun at the end of the day, let's all pack it in and say, let's
Right.
start all over tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That's amazing. You two are incredible women.
Yes.
I must say.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
And
It's
before-
very easy when it's your passion.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
of course.
And I could tell, I could feel in your energy that this is really both of your passion, and it's so beautiful to see. So thank you for sharing that with
Yes.
us.
Yes.
Thank you.
And before
you.
we let you go, I just wanted to ask you quickly if you would like to share with us your biggest success and your biggest failure on this journey. It could be business wise, you tried to do something and it flopped. Your biggest success could be a client that you really changed their life like in an amazing way. It's up to you. So we're going to start with the biggest failure, then we'll move to biggest success.
From my perspective and what we are doing, the hardest thing that I feel like we've done professionally to this point is really getting the research to kick up and get off. We had just started supporting a new a new study that's happening outside of Montreal. And COVID hit.
Oh.
We're just getting going, and oh man, no, they can't do that. And we've been working on another project with this vibrator maker, and it's been like we're working and just haven't been able to get it going. And I'm so anxious to get this all started, and that has just been really heavy, really, really, really heavy. Elizabeth?
Yeah, and I think one of the failures is thinking that we can do it all by ourselves. I mean, we've been on the phone with you an awfully long time, which is so fabulous. Dee and I we have so much experience from so many other, angles, that what's been hard for us is like funneling it down, because we get, lost here, we get, down the rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
And so that's why, we're working with business coaches who help us. And so that's been a huge success, is realizing we don't necessarily know by ourselves what's best for us and best for our clients and customers. And the successes, if we have made ourselves vulnerable and reached out to people who know better about business than we do. But I've got to say that the success is a couple that I was working with back in the day, that they had not, so it's called an unconsummated marriage, which means they haven't had sex. So see how antiquated that was. These two, both Stanford graduates. Wow. So they're not dumb people.
No.
But they'd been married for a number of different years, and they had not been able to have sex. She had such a tremendous amount of sex is dirty, a lot of things that were told in her family of origin. And it was very difficult for her to sit through any kind of gynecological exam. She'd freeze up and clench up. Well, over the course of working with her, and there are no miracles, but this couple was incredibly dedicated and they loved each other so much. Well, my huge success with that couple was when they sent me the baby announcement.
Yay. Wow. That is amazing.
And that's just one.
Oh,
okay, yeah, of
unbelievable.
Course. You must have so many stories.
Amazing.
And the fact that then she went and shared her story with some of her friends.
Oh, good.
Because she had been so scared to talk about the pain. And she had courage enough, and she'd gotten to a place where she could actually use her voice to help others. So that the fact that she then spread the message that there is hope, and there's a lot of re-education, but hope is out there. That's the biggest thing. They're our heroes. Our clients are our heroes, not what we do, because they're putting in the hard work.
Totally.
Yes, yeah, of course. You're
Thank
just
you
guiding them through it.
Right. And they're allowing us to do that, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, my top number one success, and I'll do a second quick one, is certainly the book, because it is my life's work and Elizabeth's life work. And the fact that we were able to get it down, bring it together, and get it out to the world is just mind-boggling. It's just mind-boggling that we're going to get that out there.
Yeah. And how hard is it to sit down and actually start writing? I'm writing my own book myself, and so many times I just can't start. I'm just today.
Right. And then what they say, you really do have to do just a little bit every day.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be something perfect that you keep, but you just do it every day. You jot down those thoughts, you jot down your ideas. And again, Elizabeth and I have been talking to each other for so many years that we kind of developed an outline over where we wanted to go and what we wanted to start with. And it kind of just built on there. My other greatest success is very similar to Elizabeth, and that truly is watching my vulvar pain patients who couldn't have sex on Facebook as their children are going off to grade school and to high school. Because they got through that, they were able to get through, to persevere and to do what they needed to do, and change their lives. And I used to say, I have the greatest job in the world. I get to help women have better sex. I mean, what could be better?
Yeah, I agree. Agreed.
That's pretty amazing.
My kids think it's kind of crazy, but that's okay.
Yeah,
You're probably the best mom and grandma ever. What are you talking about? They're not shy to come to you for anything. They could, that's amazing.
Okay, so we really do need to go, but I
Yes.
just have to, just because you
Yes.
did that, because I told Elizabeth we weren't going to talk about ourselves. I'm going to have one quick story.
Go
We
for
have
it.
3-year-old twins, girls.
Okay.
Wow.
Their birthday was in December. We went there for their birthday, and when I walked into the playroom, they were there with their mom. We hadn't seen them for about 6 weeks, and one of the girls says, "Grandma, did you know that Daddy has a big penis and Max, their little brother, and Max has a little penis?"
I love it. That's so
And I
funny,
said,
eh?
"Joe," I said, "yes,
So silly.
that's what happens. It's just like you and it's Sammy and JoJo.
Okay.
You and Sammy don't have any breasts. You have small breasts.
Very
And
true.
Mama has big breasts. That's what happens."
Yes.
So, yes, it's been quite interesting.
Yes.
That's cute.
Amazing. I love it.
Well, anyways,
So,
we want to
thank
really thank you
you.
for your time today. We
Thank you.
actually
Thank you
went
so
overboard,
much.
but it's so interesting that
Mhm.
time
Just
flew
delightful.
by, and I'm like, wow, already almost 2 hours in. So,
Thanks for bringing us on board. Jodi, good luck with the delivery.
Yes, when's the
Thank
baby due?
you. March 2nd. So it's coming. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We're excited.
So,
Yeah.
we get to relax because everything's ready, so we can just sit back and wait. now.
Mentally prepared.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. All right,
So,
guys.
Thank you
congratulations.
so
Best of
much.
luck and
Thank you.
We'll
Yeah.
put
Thank you for
everything
your
in
work.
the description of the podcast for people to reach you at. So all the links,
Wonderful.
everything will be there.
Wonderful.
For our listeners
Thanks,
out
Matt.
there who missed a bit on what they were saying, it'll be all written down in the description. All
Wonderful.
right.
Thanks,
Well,
Matt.
thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Jodi.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.